and welcome, Scott. Today we're talking to Scott Dawson. Scott was a former minister, and now not so much. So, how you doing tonight?
Doing really well. I like the idea of not so much. That's such a loaded phrase. Yes,
It is a loaded phrase.
Yeah.
Superman's coming out this weekend or today.
Heard.
Actually, we're recording on Friday. So, I got a question for you because this came up in debate last night about superheroes and their weaknesses within my own household. So, do you have a favorite superhero?
That's a great question. I lead focus groups, and that's often like an icebreaker question. If you had a superpower, what would it be? And I don't know that I actually have a favorite superhero. My kids are all grown adults, and they're all really into Marvel and very anti-DC. So, I understand at least that Superman's not in their wheelhouse, but
Mm-hmm.
I never got really caught up with it. And I have to wonder, not to take us immediately to, the heart of the conversation, but I wonder if like my religious background maybe has something to do with my aversion to, diving into fantasy too much. And I don't know. I've never really interrogated that connection.
That's interesting. We'll get to that. I have that stubbed away a little bit for a similar type
good.
of question. I mean, yeah, like there was things that would have been off limits for me. For heroes, not so much. We won't talk about Harry Potter.
Fair, yeah.
But that's one of them. Anything with a witch, basically, that had a witch in it is probably no go.
Okay.
So, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, the heart of the discussion last night was about superheroes and their weaknesses. And I don't really like Superman because I feel like the only thing that can harm him is a rock. So, it seems it's not great, but he was very early in the whole superhero universe as far as modern superheroes. So, it is what it is. Me, I'm a Batman fan. I like
Yeah.
Batman.
Well, Batman feels like a little more attainable too. Like all you have to do is become a billionaire, and you can be Batman.
And everybody is just a billionaire in waiting, really, these days. Right. We all know that. So anyway, well, why don't we dig into it a little bit? Why don't you talk about your background? Like, where did you grow up, and what was life like for you?
Yeah, it sounds like that. Perhaps religion was a big part of your childhood. It wasn't super pushed on me. I had kind of what I equate to more like Anglican style religiosity, where you went to church on the higher holy days. Not that it wasn't like Catholic high holy days, but you went on Easter, you went at Christmas, and then maybe if you got up in time, you'd go on a Sunday morning. But when I was probably around 10, 11 years old, my older sister's friend, her dad was starting this bus ministry for the church that we were most closely affiliated with, where, for the first time they were sending a van around to pick up kids for Sunday school and really wanted a high turnout. So, I was kind of roped into that and just ended up going every week, and it was fun. We did a lot of cool things. The youth group was fun. And then that sort of evolved as I started really, eating it up without being too critical. I mean, as a young teenager, I wasn't, there's certainly no internet, but I also wasn't questioning a lot of what I was hearing. I'm just like, oh, this is fun. And I was into music. So here was a place for me to like sing in the choir and play in a little bit of start learning some fundamentals of playing in a band. And, and that just kind of escalated, but what happened for me was I ended up down a track of going a little more fundamental. The church we belonged to, I believe, would have been considered like Dutch Reformed, probably closer to like a Presbyterian, pretty straight.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing crazy, nothing.
Boring.
Very boring, very boring. Sure. Yeah, definitely. But then, heard about this Pentecostal church down the road, and they're doing this Friday night youth group thing, and they have a full band and they got pizza every Friday,
Oh,
uh,
man, pizza.
oh,
Okay.
yeah. And lock-ins, and girls and, I mean, it just had
Uh-huh.
all the stuff, I started listening to more and more like Christian rock at the time, which this is the 80s. So that was pretty controversial even within Christendom. Like you still had a little bit of that rebellion feel because you're listening to Christian music that has guitars and, guys with long hair.
Right.
So it was just so formative, not just religiously, but also musically. And I mean this not necessarily in a great way because this is the height of satanic panic, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
so
Mhm.
my friends are listening to Metallica and Slayer and, introducing Led Zeppelin into my sphere, but I, you know, put a cross up and, would preach at them that this is not good. And, so it kind of stunted me in that way. And so I was mentioning earlier that now I wonder, did that also stunt my, sort of, fandom into some of these more, uh,
Right.
you know, darker,
Mhm.
pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll fast forward briefly. We can go back and touch on details as you want. But so I got more and more fundamental. And then as I got older, the pendulum started swinging the other way. I started really asking myself questions even before I became a lay minister in the Lutheran church. I started attending more and more mainstream denominational churches again, sort of getting out of the fundamentalism. I worked in
Right.
Christian radio. Um,
Oh,
yeah, here in Kansas City. Um, and a lot of that turned me off actually, because now I'm hearing some things sort of repeated back to me. And I'm like, oh, is this what I sound like? Do I really believe these things? Where it all started to fall apart was when I was really starting to question the concept of hell, and reconciling this idea that a loving God creator of some sort also has prepared this place for eternal torture. And that didn't make sense to me. And so moving away from some of the fundamentalist hellfire brimstone type preaching allowed me to be comfortable, maintain my the comfortable parts of faith and maybe put aside some of that kind of fringy stuff, which
right.
so I just kind of see it as getting progressively more religiously liberal. Obviously, there's a social liberalism that also starts to come when you
Follows
start
along
just,
with that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you start seeing people as humans and not as, notches in your belt or,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, part of the enemy. Um, and so, so that progression took years and years. And then, um, boy, it's just really complicated because then I had a bout of some illness and I had lots of downtime. I had for about 3 years. I was pretty sick with Lyme disease and started this like absorbing this new medium of podcasts, um, and if I'll just drop the name because it was so influential in framing, I wouldn't say convincing me or taking me away from faith, but introducing critical thinking, skepticism,
Yeah.
thinking about things in a way without that's deeper than just accepting what I'm told. And that podcast was The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And I don't know if you're
Mhm.
familiar with it.
I've heard of it. I don't
Yeah,
know. I mean, actually, I've definitely come through a few podcasts here and there to,
sure.
on my own journey. So, I'll just make a note, put it in the show notes.
Okay. Well, and please stop me if you want to take a diversion, but that happened when I really got into that podcast was, I want to say 2011, maybe. So, and I was also just starting school full time as an unconventional student, having come out of being sick and on disability. I was now starting to feel better. started going to school full time, found this podcast. I'm taking critical thinking, philosophy courses. I'm taking science courses. I'm
Wow.
taking math. I'm starting from scratch. I went from beginning mathematics, all the way up to calculus at UMKC, which are not things I would have ever pursued because these, the religious, I'm going to just call it what it is, poisoning in my mind was pursuing those things were, the world. They were not spiritual,
Right.
they required being challenged. And if we're to be honest, it required challenging my dogma. So eventually I got to a point, as I'm becoming more and more religiously liberal, and now I'm listening to some very intelligent people talk about, look, if your faith is true, it should be able to withstand any any kind of scrutinization.
Oh, I see. If your faith is true. So you weren't a true Christian.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. That was one of my favorite parts of philosophy and critical thinking was learning about all the logical fallacies and realizing why they were fallacies, um, and it really, there was a pain involved with letting go of dogma, but there's also the other side of that is like, oh, there's a whole new world of stuff was opening up to me, to learn and explore and absorb. And so at one point, probably probably 2013 is when I was like, I don't believe anymore, and I needed to say that out loud, and kind of own that and try it on, put it
Yeah.
on, see how it feels.
That's an uncomfortable vest to put on,
It
man.
is.
It's not after you've been in it for a long time. It's like feel good at all.
Yeah. Well, and you start couching things, right? You're like, well, I'm not an atheist. I'm just an agnostic. We've heard a lot of this probably, and I don't want to assume where you are in that. I've since come to this idea, obviously, that atheism is the default setting, and even as an atheist, should there be sufficient evidence, I would gladly change my mind. And folks kind of
Yeah.
couch it as,
Yeah.
well, agnostics are open to, well, no, if you're a critical thinker, you're open to evidence and proof. And I
Sure.
certainly consider myself that.
I'm at 1%. I'm giving I'm giving 1% possibility, which is not nothing, right? So I'm still open to something if sufficient evidence can be presented. One of the questions that often gets answered or asked is, what would it take?
Hmm.
I've heard different answers, and I have my own. I mean, I tend to think, testable, measurable, repeatable, that type of thing. But one of the other answers that I've heard that I think is pretty good is that if God is real, He'll know what it takes,
Hmm.
right? He's
Tell
gonna
me more.
know.
Tell me more.
Yeah, right. So if God knows what it takes, one, assuming God is real, if and knows what it takes to get me to believe, then He already knows exactly what it would
Hmm.
take. Would it be that I'm driving along a Missouri highway, I look up in the stars, and my name is spelled out? Um, I'd be it's interesting. That would certainly capture my attention, but then again, I know that you're connected through a satellite provider for the internet, so I'm going to ask more questions, right? So, so it is just like I didn't know what it would be to deconvert me. I had no idea, and that I find that that's interesting, and that's why I think these stories are interesting, is because everybody's a little different on what it definitely was. Like for you, it was hell, I mean, hell being a pretty grave concept, if you will, no pun intended.
Hmm.
Now, I was in a discussion earlier today talking about annihilationism. Was that part of your Lutherans, like I don't know, Lutheran, Anglican, is that, the idea being that, um as I understand it, because that definitely wasn't my upbringing, that hell, Satan, everything will be thrown into the lake of fire, as we know
Mhm.
from Revelation, and
Mhm.
that and then it'll be a basically just a snuffing out. Like you don't get the joy of being in eternity, but you don't actually exist anymore. And I've read online there's some different debates
Mhm.
about how far that goes. Apparently that there's some belief that that happens for like maybe you go to hell for 12 months, that there's some Jewish roots in there. I'm not entirely sure. Or I don't know. It's to me that's hard for me to wrap my head around because
Yeah.
it's in the red letters that is told, and I don't. It's not really consistent with the rest of the Bible because
Go figure.
God's kind of a God's kind of a vengeful dude,
Right.
in the
Well,
Bible.
and he apparently likes to be very obscure, like let's
Yeah,
just dangle truth in front of people and see what they do. That capriciousness also played into this, aversion to hell. As a believer, I got into all those conversations, the whole pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, what is the eschatology, all these debates, even within other Christians. And it was bad enough that you had the non-believers over here in the enemy camp, but then you had to start parsing out, well, who's believing correctly? Who,
yeah.
who has the right theology, and that's the only people I'm going to stick with. It's easy to look back on it now. I feel like I've, been away from it long enough that it's not as triggering to think about those things, but it was just all consuming. So annihilationism, you called it.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything specifically about that, but I just remember so many tangential conversations around that idea. And it's just
I want to make
exhausting.
sure that I get it right, and nothing is more right than Google's AI. So it says here, and I'm being absolutely facetious, annihilationism in Christian theology is the belief that the damned will ultimately be destroyed and cease to exist rather than suffering eternal torment, conscious torment in hell. And then it goes on to mention this view contrasts with the traditional doctrine of
Mhm.
eternal conscious torment and is often associated with the concept of conditional immortality. So the funny thing about that is that I was raised Southern Baptist. That's heresy. I mean, I can just
Oh,
easily dismiss that and move on. It's no big
sure.
deal. Now that I don't believe in that at all, I'm I like to know more about where that came from. That's cool. Would have to learn more about that. More reading, always more reading. Um, and this is the worst hobby ever.
I would say at least at the stage you're at, 'cause
Yeah, sure,
yeah,
sure, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, well, I mean, I say that, but then, like my daughter, she likes to listen to This Mythical Morning with Rhett McLaughlin. He's a Christian dude. Him and his buddy that I can't remember his name. Yeah, they have a they have a podcast called Pod Beans. I think. No, that's not it. Bean Biscuits. I don't know what it's called, but. I'm not a regular listener, but I was watching Rhett McLaughlin on Alex O'Connell or Connor. Yeah, sorry, Alex O'Connor, who is a British atheist that does a lot of debates, and he was on Jubilee once with 20 Christians. Actually, it was 19. Yeah, 20 Christians, but one of them was also Mormon. They saved him for last to make it fun. But in this discussion, McLaughlin talks about how he's been out, I think about as long as you have. So whenever the new atheism movement kind of started
Mhm.
around 2010, that kind of
Yep.
stuff, was whenever he started questioning some things. And for him, it was evolution that did it. But he made a comment in there. He said, that evangelical part of my brain never goes away. It is just always there. And I was like, oh wow. And I made my daughter watch that. I'm like, I need you to hear it from this guy that you like
Yeah.
because you need to understand me because that's how I feel. It's like this thing that just kind of hovers around in the background. It's
Mhm.
like a clone of me in a weird way that doesn't ever go away. Um, and I've become more comfortable with it. But it's still, yeah, it doesn't go away. It's
So
just there.
so in that context, do you fear it raising its head and becoming like an atheist evangelist, or or is it a separate voice that you think might pull you back in?
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because post, like right after I did that, so July 15th of last year was the day that I publicly told my friends that I don't believe in God anymore. And by friends, I mean the people that I went to church with. Um, and I decided to do some therapy. After that, I did one with someone who specialized in who she was a former Christian as well, and so that was her specialty. And we talked about that. I brought it up and was like, and she goes, "Well, that might be part of your evangelical background." And I was kind of bothered by that at first. I'm like, "Oh gosh, I don't want this like just being what is it? Is it transference whenever you just kind of like switch from one addiction to another,
Right. Yeah.
um and that kind of bothered me. I'm like, I don't rise above that, right? but um but then people like Seth Andrews, he labels himself as an atheist activist.
Yeah.
He's advocating for some positions, and then any place in the world where they, I don't know, execute people just because they don't believe in Sky Daddy. Yeah, I think we need to have some evangelicalism to some point.
Mhm.
Just to say, I mean, dude, like I said, Southern Baptist atheists were 100% evil. They ate babies.
Mhm.
Um, they were just so wrong, and so
Now it's just Democrats.
that's true. I mean, I don't even. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because you're right. I mean, it's kind of feels like the Satanic Panic all over again in a lot of ways. It's
Yeah.
which
Well, it
that
was
you know
effective. It was super effective. I mean, how
super
many of us
yeah
smashed our albums or smashed our tapes? And,
mm,
y
yeah
you know, I became hyper evangelical at a young age. I mean, I was,
yeah
going on mission trips. I went to Hungary right after high school with Teen Mania, which, I don't know if you know anything about Teen Mania, but
it
Google it some
sounds
other time. It's a mess. Ron Luce, crook. They sent us to Hungary with a guy who had murdered somebody when he was 16, but Jesus, saved him and
yeah
sent him with a bunch of teenagers to Hungary to, hang out. But and then I joined a group called Covenant Players. I was very much a joiner when I was younger. I had joined a
well
group, traveling the country, doing theater, covertly bringing Christian messages into public schools, and very proud about how we were sneaky about it. So
yeah
I hear you.
um well, that's the thing about joining groups, being active, is that's one of the beauties of church, I think, and religion, is that you get this turnkey uh, community that, whenever we moved from Lawrence to Kansas City, and then, you kind of hop around, you're like, well, got to find a church. And so you go to some different ones. And then once you finally pick one and settle in, you could probably get integrated within 2 to 3 months. It doesn't take long because you all have the shared thing that you believe in, and you probably know half the songs already. And, the ceremonies are the same, like the Lord's Supper and all that kind of stuff. And so you don't really have to start from scratch. And then you just find a small group or find a Sunday school class that, and then that is a good thing that I don't want to take away from that, but to me that just calls out to humanity's need for community, to rely on each other, to talk to each other, touch each other, and have podcasts.
Yeah.
you know and so yeah, that's really important. So you were a joiner, you say?
I was a joiner, but only because that was how I was initiated into church to
Right.
begin with. I mean, it's
Yeah.
by design. Homogeneity is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
There is no room for, and I'm talking writ large. There may be exceptions to this, but there's no room for thinking differently. Everybody has the same morals, allegedly, all
Yeah.
moving towards the same goal in the same direction. But I also found myself like, constantly feeling like if I wasn't a part of a group, then who was I? Like, I didn't have
Right.
this identity, you know?
Yeah. We're all trying to fit in somewhere,
Yeah.
and they're cool enough, like
Mhm.
mom and dad's not too mad or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and I was reading, I just finished reading Dan McClellan's The Bible Says So, and he makes a really good point where he says that the Bible doesn't really say anything. It's what you take from it, and you can make things like you were mentioning, like, oh, find people within your morals. Well, I mean, my church believes this because the Bible says so. Well, maybe, but also this other church down the road who were clearly the enemy. I never fully reconciled what the belief was about, like, well, I was raised Southern Baptist. We were sure we were right, of course. And then, what about First Baptist Church that was 8 blocks over that really wasn't any different, that those minute differences between the two, but still Southern Baptist, I think. Maybe they were American Baptist. I don't know. But like, is that a deal breaker for heaven? Was that a deal breaker for being in the good graces? Is it just a misunderstanding and it doesn't matter? Is it more universalist? I don't know. Like, it was kind of confusing whenever you really, I mean, to me, that's the beginning of critical
Mhm.
thinking, but you're still critical thinking within the box that you're in rather than being outside of it.
I think that is perhaps, more the norm. You think about conversion into religion, it's kind of a misnomer because, you've grown up or you around it. It's not, the concept of Jesus is not new to you. You go to
Hmm.
an especially emotional, moving ceremony and you decide you're going to convert to Christianity. But in reality, it's something that's been, sort of, you've been engulfed in it probably, either at the fringes or,
Yeah.
you grew up in it, but you never made it yours. So even somebody who's born and raised in Southern Baptist Church can probably tell a story of, well, when I was 15, even though I've been going to church since I was born and baptized, when I was 15 is when I really made a decision for Jesus. Deconstructing, I think, takes a similar path. Like I can remember when I finally said, okay, I need to admit to myself, but it was years of, kind of rolling the stone just to keep within the metaphor,
Yeah.
slowly moving it away, gaining a little bit of ground, gaining some other clarity, in some areas while not needing to let go of some of the stuff that was a little more comfortable. Um, but looking back, it feels like, oh, like I was a believer up until the day I wasn't. And then, I never looked back. But I think that's just my own like flawed memory, rewriting the experience, but it was many years.
I don't know. I would feel that way. I mean, like, there were questions, and I was always told that questions were okay, that it's normal to have questions, doubting Thomas, blah blah blah, go through a litany of people in the Bible that had their own questions about things, and that's okay. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have doubt. It's okay to be angry at God. It's okay to have these very natural human feelings, which I think is great. But at the same time, I always kept in with the belief. And then, you mentioned something earlier about, like, dabbled in agnosticism, like, oh, maybe I'm agnostic. And that's how I was for maybe 2 weeks, where I was like, I can't be an atheist because,
Bad word.
that's a bad word. And I saw some comedian on Instagram where she said something similar. She's like, well, I'm agnostic. She's like, I'm actually atheist, but I just want people to like me.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And so yeah, I get that, right? Because there is this stigma attached with it. I think stigmas are so dumb, by the way. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it does, because it goes both ways. Like, not all Christians are evil and, want to do and feel this way with like, you're going to burn in hell forever if you don't, believe this. So, and I'll acknowledge that. I mean, my closest friend, she is ordained, and her husband, they both, like, he preaches, and they're in a progressive church, and I'm like, yeah, you're nice, you're fine. I don't have any problem with you. And I've asked her questions, and she'll be like,
Mhm.
I don't know how to answer that, but
I
yeah,
would make the argument that, and I've met several like what you're describing, and I would just make the argument that she's nice in spite of,
yeah,
not because of. And I think that's
yeah,
an important distinction.
yeah. But where does that come from?
Mhm.
Where does the niceness come from?
Yeah.
Nature versus nurture. Just maybe people saying, I just want to be nice.
Yeah, I think you can be a humanist and be religious.
Mm-hmm.
Humanism, in my experience, tends to be a religious people, folks who've moved away from church but wanted to have that community.
Yeah,
Oasis in Kansas City is
true.
a humanist,
Yeah,
kind of centered congregation.
right.
So I think there's that element where but I think it requires you to ignore so much of what the basis of religious faith is. And you have to have these justifications. Well, that thing was meant for that time. This other thing is meant for me and you, but this other thing wasn't meant for us. And you got to do this mental gymnastics.
The gymnastics, man. If I only did gymnastics physically as well as I used to do
Right.
mentally, like I'd be amazing. I'd be
Right.
Olympic gold medalist. You find all sorts of ways to justify things, but then you eventually, if you ask enough questions, you get to the point where you got to be intellectually honest, and you're like,
Agreed.
you know what, I don't think maybe that flood thing happened.
Yep. But it's easier to stop asking questions,
Yeah, I mean,
it's
because
more comfortable. Yeah.
the opposite of that, or the other side of to stop and not ask questions anymore, is you get to take the blue pill, as the Matrix. I just rewatched the Matrix recently, so you get to take the blue pill. You get to go back to the stakes, and I get a nice job and whatever, and everything's fine, and I don't have anything to worry about. And then you take the red pill. And I don't mean to co-opt that word from the
Right.
terrible movement that happened, but
Right.
the analogy still fits, right? I
I
mean,
agree.
that you get to a point where your eyes are open and you can't go back from that. You've seen the other side, and it starts to answer the questions that you were seeking because the mental gymnastics didn't work anymore.
Uh-huh.
And then you're like, oh, damn, what do I do with this? I guess I'll be an agnostic. Uh, so that way no one will hate me.
That desire that I had early on in my deconstruction to shake people out of that has gone away. I think that
Okay.
was residual evangelism. That's kind of what I
Mm-hmm.
was getting at when I was
Yeah,
asking
sure.
you.
Yeah.
For the most part, I mean, I truly have no desire to talk anybody out of their faith. In fact, I'll just be very blunt. My daughter, my oldest child, is very much a believer,
Mm-hmm.
and we've tried
Did
to
you cut her
have
off? You should have cut
no,
her off. I mean,
God, no. I mean, that would be the Christian thing to do, but
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
But I have learned that, we can't have a conversation about it, without her getting very upset. And it's not worth it to me, Um, it's just not important enough for me. Now, some would probably say, well, your salvation is important enough for me to argue you out of your spot. And if that means making you uncomfortable, but I think that's part of the bigger change that happens when you abandon religious dogma is, again, you start seeing people for humans, meaning we're on this earth for a very short period of time. That's what gives it value, not some fantasy of what happens later. It is
Yeah.
now. It is
Yeah.
today, um, and this whole idea that an atheist has no purpose or can't be in awe or, doesn't have a purpose driven life
I've
is
not heard that one. You can't be in awe of something?
no. Atheists can't be in awe because, it's just all numbers and science. You can't have mystery. And there's so many unanswered questions
I
in
had mystery
science.
setting up this fucking software to record this.
Are you in awe though?
I'm in awe that we're getting through it. And by the way, if it isn't obvious, you can say whatever you want to. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's
I
great.
don't.
Thanks for
I
leading the
don't.
way on that.
I'm just like, no, I'm in awe. I can't believe that us humans have pulled off some of these things. I mean, we just driving down the road, a paved road. How boring, right? But I mean, just everything that it took just to get that, and then to build out a transportation system that is flawed, and we find ways to improve it, and then we do that, right? And I saw one of those really ugly trucks. You know which one I'm talking about? The truck,
Really
and we,
sharp one. Yeah.
yeah, the really sharp ones, yeah. And so I saw one of those before the podcast, and I was riding with my daughter because she had to go pick up something, and she's like, "Oh, here comes one of those ugly trucks," and I'm like, "Well, here's the deal." I said, "I don't disagree. However, I am in awe of the fact that someone took a chance to take something that in a sea of vehicles that all of them kind of look the same. I mean, most minivans, they all look the same. Most sedans look the same. Trucks look the same for the most part. So it's kind of nice to see one. That's what sports cars are kind of interesting, right? Because they're more expensive, but that's not the selling point. The selling point is you see them and you go, wow, I am in awe of that design. Some human or group of humans more likely, and focus group somewhere, said, hey, let's make this. Let's put it out into the world and see what happens. That I'm in awe of, because that took
That's a good
human
point.
ingenuity and bravado, really, to let's see what happens. So,
but it's a great example of how, the driving force behind that has so much power to destroy that awe. Again, think
yeah,
of somebody who's not a humanist. We were
right,
we were talking earlier. I'm dependent on Starlink. I mean, I cannot. Where I live, I have no other option. We've tried it. Regular satellite internet is dial-up speed. I can't have meetings. I can't do my job.
sure.
So I'm tethered to it, and I'm in awe because it's an incredible product. I mean,
And
it works.
I've seen pictures of your place, and we'll hopefully visit,
Yeah.
this year
Yeah.
at some point. And I'm in awe of your place. And
Yeah.
whatever, I could see why you would want to do what you could to stay there,
Stay here. Yeah.
because it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
so if you get to be connected to something that is pretty awe inspiring. I mean, satellite technology
It's
for
incredible.
but it was crap for the longest time. You couldn't
I
do
know.
anything, and then, I don't
But
really want to acknowledge the space junk or anything like that. We'll just conveniently ignore that. But yeah, I mean, good and bad, but we figure things out as we go along. So
we do. And yeah, I'm in awe of just what we're doing right now. This video conferencing thing. Like I remember prior to the lockdown, this
yeah,
stuff was really glitchy. Zoom was kind of worked.
awful.
Skype, people were still using Skype, but
Yeah.
in the presence of pressure to, ramp up that technology, humans got together, put their heads together, and Zoom in a matter of months became the standard. I mean, it did incredibly well. That kind of thing is awe-inspiring.
It really is. Yeah.
But, to take it back, yeah, that's, I hear that a lot, not necessarily directed at me, but certainly from people who are around me. Like, this is, Zeus, honest truth. I'm trying to think of another god, but the gods, the
Yes.
gods plural, honest truth. Yesterday I had
Big
an
fan of
interaction.
Anubis,
Yeah,
the dog god from Egypt. Yeah.
I have the Eye of Horus on my arm. I should
Nice.
probably have said Horus. Yeah. It's right next to my ichthus that I had first, and then I put the Eye of Horus to kind of juxtapose. But anyway, my wife, with a couple partners, has a store in town, and I had a day yesterday where I didn't have to be tied to my desk. So I went into the store and hung out there with her while she worked and, used their internet and did stuff. A customer came in. Very long story short, she is a member of the church that I used to be a minister at, the Lutheran church here in town.
Fun.
And I had not seen her, probably since 2011.
Yeah.
And she came over and we said hi. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you look so good. Last time she saw me, I was really sick. And, I've gotten better." And, the first thing she says is, "Where are you guys going to church?" And I said,
Man, I've heard that before.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the probably second most important thing she wanted to talk about. Not about my health, not about anything else. "Where are you going to church?"
Can I take a quick pause, if you don't
Yeah.
mind? Do you think that was a gossipy thing? Like,
No.
we don't know where he's been. I got to get in on the inside track.
Maybe there was a little bit of that, but at
Yeah.
the church, not only was I a lay minister, but I also led the contemporary worship band. So, she saw me up there a lot. A
Yeah.
lot of people liked the music that we were doing. But, I'm clearly not following me on Facebook or anything because, she would have known not to ask that maybe.
Yeah.
But I looked at her and you go through this very, millisecond calculation of, okay, what do I want to do? Am I the evangelist right now, or am I just a kind person to someone who's asking out of a genuine curiosity?
Yeah.
But I needed to tell the truth, right?
You need to tell the truth, right?
Yeah. So I said, we're not. And I say we only because, and I don't want to speak for my wife, because that's probably a whole other podcast of how we worked through my deconversion and not hers.
We'll make a note of that for another time.
We'll make a note another time. Because there's probably a whole path you could go down with, relationship wise, with the impact that this can have. But anyway, suffice to say, we don't go to church. And as soon as I said that to her, she just made the biggest frowny face, like she was so sad. And I'm like, "Oh no, it's not a bad thing. It's okay."
My Sunday mornings are awesome now. Like,
you
have
on me.
no idea. I was just saying, my Sunday mornings are awesome now. You have no idea.
Right. But, I'll spare you the rest of that conversation, because I think that was enough when I just told her, no, it's a good thing. It's fine. That was enough. She made a couple more overtures, like but I think she learned enough from that exchange that, okay, things are different now.
Yeah.
But that was just yesterday, and I'm a decade or more away from my deconstruction or initiation of my deconstruction, and still struggle with like seeing people from the church and, how do I talk to them? How do I tell them?
Yeah.
And you're so close to yours. I can't even imagine, the intensity of that.
It's not really that intense when either they left or I left them. I mean, I did want to ask you about that, the fallout. Like you said, if she would have known you on Facebook, then she would have known this. How was it to come out, given that, leadership position in a church, and now you're telling people, I'm not with this anymore. How did that? I mean, how many people did you lose in the Great War?
Sure. That's a great question. I think I was lucky. Those are scare quotes. Because I was sick for 3 years, I stopped going to church.
Okay.
I was in IV intravenous treatment 7 days a week, 6 hours a day.
I see. So you kind of like,
there was a buffer. Yeah. There was a buffer.
Yeah.
And I emerged on the other side of that, basically a different person.
Yeah.
But a couple other things have happened in that time. So right around that time frame, I was about 37 years old. I was also diagnosed as being on the spectrum. I'm 52 now. So I've also had perhaps been able to turn my special interest powers that come with being autistic into, kind of this new path, I don't want to say recreating a new me, but certainly discovering, sometimes I think back to how this could have been handled if I was still deep in the church. And there's a lot of problematic ideas about neurodivergence or mental health. And, every day I'm just thankful that I'm not in it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I have had my why didn't I take the blue pill moments.
Yep.
When it comes to community, I think that's kind of where I'm at now. Late 40s, and dealing with, like, the kids are I mean, my youngest kid is 10 and my oldest, she just graduated. So, and then I got one in the middle.
Yeah,
So,
that's a
but they're
spread.
all,
Yeah,
they're all pretty dependent or independent. And so they don't really need us other than the normal, like we homeschool, so we have that going on, but
mhm.
and have the transportation things, but I'm certainly not wiping any butts or anything like that. So I don't, in that kind of community, oh man, like whenever you got young kids and you can go to church and like get an hour of,
Load them, yeah,
yeah,
unload them,
of,
yeah,
of someone, with someone who you perceive to be safe,
right.
but that's a whole other
Statistically,
thing.
though, boy, we were
Oh,
really we were it was a crapshoot, with
yeah.
our kids. It really
Yeah,
was.
but you didn't know that then. Like, you
No.
thought that everything was safe and cool, and
Yep.
you couldn't be any safer than a church on a Sunday morning, right? I mean, in your head. So, yeah. So it sounds like you don't really have a whole lot of what I would call PTSD these days.
It probably comes up in other ways, but I think I've worked through a lot of it for sure. That's
Yeah,
the short answer. I think what I'm dealing with now is really tied to our conversation about like activism versus evangelism versus live and let live. Like, to what extent do I want to be involved?
yeah,
I don't know. You can cut this out if you want, but I know you and I
yeah.
have, we've
Fuck
talked
it,
back.
roll it.
Well, we've talked off and on about doing a podcast together, and I've dragged my feet on that, and which wasn't fair to you. I'm glad to see that you're just saying, you know what, we're just going to do this interview, and I'm moving on. But
I don't have anyone to talk to about this shit. I mean,
no, and I
seriously,
get that.
like,
I get that.
like, I
I
mean,
get,
I'm not trying to use this as my own therapy, although it is cheaper.
there's nothing
Um,
wrong with that.
but I also like to hear other people's perspectives about their different walks of life, and mainly like what causes people. I don't like, I know what started it in a weird way, sorta, or I think I did, but then I'll think of other things like, well, that was a question then that it was a question, and then I just kind of like drove past it and didn't really think about it. But then later, it's like, it's a big ball of things. It's not just one thing. I mean, for you, it sounds like hell was the nail in the coffin. For me, it was um, the flood story, learning that it was written by a totally different civilization, but a nearby civilization. Much earlier than the Hebrew Bible's oldest documents, and that there are language indicators in there that clearly indicate that the Noah story was stolen from the Epic of Gilgamesh. And stolen is a pretty rough word. I mean, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say Harry Potter was stolen
In,
from Star Wars, but they were definitely, there's some huge parallels between Star Wars and Harry
yeah.
Potter if you boil it down to just the
Shot for
basic
shot.
concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hit for
So,
hit. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, the evangelical going out and talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if that's part of who we are as people, that like we just like to tell other people and get active. I mean, I think,
I don't know.
or if
I
it's a
always
religious thing.
hated that. I think some of it is cultural. Some of it is maybe just this human need that, hey, I found this good thing, let me share it. I
Yeah.
love the thought experiment of tying that back to, like, that's how language started, right? It was carrying a description or a word from one place to another. If you didn't have to communicate outside of your immediate group, language wouldn't probably have developed. My degrees in anthropology and sociology, and
Okay.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I'm no expert on it, but that was always fascinating to me, is how the human need has led to a lot of evolution. Obviously, it's an evolutionary pressure, and I think that applies to this whole idea of, hey, if I truly believe I've got the good news, I've got salvation, I'm being saved from some fiery damnation. Yeah, I want everybody to know. Like, that makes sense to me. But I was always, even in, the when I was, just Bible carrying, believer, I was always uncomfortable with the one-on-one talking about my faith that way. I could do it in a group. That's, I think, why
Yeah.
I was a joiner. I could
Mm-hmm.
do it on a mission trip, some big grandiose gesture, standing outside the window with boombox was not my thing, but going with 30 people, where I
Yeah.
could hide in the crowd but still be a part of something like that. So I think some of that carried over too, like I still have some of that same reticence to, really get deep with somebody on,
Yeah.
trying to deconvert them, but I'd still love a good conversation and an exchange of ideas. So, I think that's kind of where I'm trying to sort of live my unbelief is,
Right.
not hiding who I am, not being afraid that I'm going to, you know, hurt your sensibilities as a believer if I tell you that, I don't believe any of that. But here's why.
Mm-hmm.
Take
Yeah.
it or leave it,
Right.
and I can sense pretty quickly when somebody is not up for that conversation, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to walk away from it.
Yeah. I have a tool that I borrowed from the neighbor down the cul-de-sac, right? He's a preacher. We haven't really talked much since the fall. It's been winter and stuff, and I think that I ran into his wife. I walk a lot, and she was out walking, and I said hi and asked how he was doing, and she's like, "Oh well, um he had some health issues, and then he had to change jobs because he worked for like a small place, not in Riverside, and that he had to find something, but he found something, pays better, he's feeling better, so that's all good. I should probably return his tool. I'm unsure how that's gonna go, if we're gonna have a conversation or not. Maybe we don't, and I'm okay. I don't have to bring it up. I mean, I don't walk around and be like, "Hey, I'm an atheist." I mean, aside from a sticker that I have on my truck, that's about it. But that's because I got the sticker because everywhere you go, man, like somebody's got, like you said, the ichthus, which for those who don't know is it's the little symbol of a fish that has some sort of story that now that I ask all these questions, I don't even know if that story is true. Like about how that it was a way of telling if somebody was a believer that they would make a half
Draw it in the
circle and the other
sand.
person
Yeah.
would do it and be like, "Oh, I'm a
Mhm.
believer. Oh, cool, we're safe," until someone figures out the code.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know, but there's Christian hats, Christian T-shirts, which I certainly wore plenty of those in the past, So, and I'm just like, you know what? I'll put this on there, and then it's not that big or anything, but every once in a while I see like the flying spaghetti monster decal, and I'm like, kindred spirits, yes,
I
we
love
are,
that one.
you know. So I know I'm not alone in the desire. You say I don't feel like you can actively deconvert somebody because I didn't choose my unbelief. It just kind of I asked enough questions and didn't get enough answers to the point that it just kind of happened. It
Mhm.
was one of the more surreal experiences that I've had in my life. Like, oh, this is weird and different from what I've known my entire life. But yeah. But I am vocal. I'm more than happy to be vocal
Mhm.
and talk about it. Got no problem with that. If that's considered to be evangelizing, so be it. I don't care.
Yeah,
You know.
I think you're right. I think that is different. I think that is, certainly not going around knocking on your neighbor's door saying,
Would you like to not come to
yeah,
church with me
yeah,
today?
yeah, yeah. My favorite was I had some folks knocking on my door a few years ago, and they said, would you like to talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ? And I said, sure. What would you like to know? I was already an atheist. You know what I mean? And they weren't sure what to make of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
in those settings, I'm fine being a little more, I don't know, antagonistic or at least more
Mhm.
direct. But I'm thinking more in terms of like friendships or,
Sure.
even work conversation. Obviously, it doesn't come up often in work. Um, but yeah, that's being an atheist evangelical seems
It
antithetical in many
yeah,
ways.
it
Yeah.
seems, like they shouldn't go together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it seems like a movie waiting to be made, right? Like
Seriously.
like a atheist or at least a Saturday Night Live skit, where you're going door to
Well,
door and you're
they
you're
tried
saying,
to do a movie and it was terrible. Have you heard
"Oh,
of the Ledge?
no,
Yeah,
The
look it
Ledge?"
up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to be an atheist movie, and it's just terrible. But
Yeah.
um, it's kind of on par with like a really bad Christian movie. Just
Well,
the
there's
other
no
end of it.
shortage of those. So,
Right.
fortunately, I haven't seen too many of those because those were a generation after me. I feel like.
Okay.
A lot of the I mean, I read books back in my day, like This Present Darkness, the Frank
Oh,
Peretti books,
read
that
them
kind of
all.
stuff. Oh
Read them
yeah,
all.
so
Yeah.
it was great, and then
Yeah. Have you
back
read
back in my day, we didn't have movies,
No, well, we certainly didn't have, digital readers. So I kind of
No,
miss
no,
reading a book. Another
yeah.
big influential book for me was The Wind in the Wheat. Have you heard of that?
Oh, I haven't heard of that. No,
It's a
no.
young Kansas worship leader who gets discovered and ends up in Nashville. And then, like my dream at the time was to be in the Christian music industry. And, again, another podcast. I touched the edges of it, but,
Great, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Future things. So,
Yep.
well, one thing about being evangelical about this is that there are real world repercussions that's happening right now. That's happening in our, in our country, in our states, in our cities that are harming people. They're actually harming people. And I believe a large part of this, I see a huge parallel between any kind of extremism,
Mhm.
um, if it's political extremism or religious extremism, or food extreme. It doesn't matter. You just have to start asking questions about, like, why do I believe this way? Like, how did
Mhm.
I come to this conclusion? Is this true? Is it not true? What am I not seeing? And everybody's just absolutely sure they're right.
Yeah.
We're just sure they're right, and everybody else that's not with me is wrong, and they're evil. That's the thing. That's
Yep.
the key, right? It's okay to
Agreed.
have differences. It's okay to be like, yeah, I don't agree, but I mean, you're wrong. Apple makes the better products, but you're wrong. But I don't think, you know, can you tell that I'm an Apple
That
fanboy?
that
So, um,
damn it. That's a bridge too far, Gene. Sorry.
but anyway, but the, people, I don't have to hate anybody for that. I just disagree. Being like, well, it's fine. Like, that's what I prefer. That's what you prefer. That's fine. I'm not harming anybody. I'm not burning any churches is all I'm saying,
Right.
you know.
But what about bridges? Are you burning bridges?
Oh yeah, I burned all the bridges. So I think, in some ways, I didn't. This is not about me though. We don't have to. This is about you, man.
Oh,
But
oh, oh.
but
Yeah.
but to be fair, yeah, like from for me, like the leaving the small group was the biggest thing that we went
Mhm.
to, because there's a small group of people. We'd known them for years, went through a lot of stuff together. Had been around me when my mom died, and that was helpful. you know and then you go and you just like, hey, this common bond that we have,
Mhm.
I don't have that anymore. And then
Mhm.
it leads to other things, and I we tried to make it work. We tried to hold on and be like, no, it's fine, it's a good thing, you can come back, and we'll have discussions, and we'll just be open. And I'm like, and I was actually interested in that, because if there's anybody I want to talk about this stuff
Sure.
with, it's probably people that already know it,
Yep. Yep.
that know more than just the basics of Christian stuff. And I just, when I did do that, I went back once, and then me and some of the guys were hanging out afterwards outside. I think we shot some fireworks, and somebody says, "Oh, he'll be back," And then I was like, "Oh, you think this is temporary?" Like, in my head, I registered like, "No, no, no, you don't understand you don't understand the pain that I went through just to get to this moment to talk about it with you people." Like, tears and agony, and I have a gnat in my office that we've had these at work too. It's been terrible, but yeah, the tears and agony and grief, and it was not great, and I had a good friendship that I'm sure I pushed too hard because he was the guy. He was the guy that I really wanted to talk to. He's the most contrarian person I probably have ever known. And I'm like, there's no way you actually believe this shit, right? I mean, that's how I was thinking, which, by the way, is a fallacy. It's called the curse of knowledge. So you know something, you assume that because you know something, other people know things,
Mm-hmm,
and that they're going to come to that understanding. But that is not how this works. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess it did take a while, didn't it? Because for me,
Yep.
it's probably 2.5, 3 years, maybe. I didn't realize it, but it did, asking questions, seeking answers, and then one day getting that final nail in the coffin,
Yep.
with the,
Yeah, you would have become a project. You know,
yeah,
you were going through a stage, and they were going to pull you back from that, and you're in a crisis that they are there to fix instead of like listening, and hearing what you're saying. So it's probably for the
yeah,
best.
yeah. Listening would have been nice. I
Yeah.
kind of felt like I never got a real good chance to explain where I was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like, I had questions like, are you sure that you haven't been deceived? Are you checking the quality of your sources? I'm like, you don't know me, do you? Really? I mean,
Right.
it took me months to research the chair I'm sitting in now that I've
Mm-hmm.
had for 15 years that honestly it needs to replace. But yeah, I drove my wife crazy because she's like, are you ever going to buy that chair? I'm like, oh, I'm doing my research.
Not
So,
ready yet.
I really, really dive into it. I really go deep because when I do commit to something, I want to be fairly sure if possible. I've kind of gotten away from that now. I'm a little bit more easygoing, I think, with things. And maybe that process comes from being a Christian. Like, well, you got to be sure, But yeah, I was asked
Mhm.
things like, are you sure you're not being deceived?
Yeah.
Um,
Did you
you
pray on
know,
it?
did you, yeah, I had that question asked. Yes, I did pray on it,
Yeah.
and yeah, he didn't show up. I said, you
Yep.
got to be here. Where you at? I got to see something because I'm at the end, And I've heard other atheists say similar things where they just got to the point
Sure.
where they're just like, God, if you are there, I have to. And you would think that if, you know, we have kids, right? If
Mhm.
our, if one of my kids said,
I know what you're going to say.
if you love me, I need you to listen to me and show me some evidence that you're committed to this relationship.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. I was like, oh, if it's, what is it? What's the saying? It's not a religion, it's a relationship.
A
Well,
relationship.
yeah. So
One way.
if it's a relationship, then I need you and I need you now.
Mhm.
And don't tell me to just wait on it because I need you now. The house is on fire. So where the fuck
And
are
can
you?
you get can
you know?
can you get a more pure faith than that moment though? Because you
Oh,
hear that a
yeah.
lot. You didn't
Wow.
believe
I've never
right.
thought about that before. That's amazing. Yeah.
It's unadulterated faith.
Yeah. Like, I
100%
truly believe
open.
I'm talking to someone that
Yes, and
exists.
open to whatever the answer is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh shit, dude. I'm gonna have to write that down. Yeah, that's you're right. It was a very pure moment. And but the irony of everything is that now I read nightly with one of my kids. We read through the Bible. I got a Catholic Bible, which I never would have done before because that's evil, obviously. But I never read the Apocrypha. I was always kind of told that, oh, the Apocrypha, I'm sorry, the deuterocanonical
Sure.
books. Want to be respectful. But yeah, the Apocrypha, that was off limits as a Southern Baptist
Yes, it would
because
be.
that's not canon. But I was told it was historically important, and yet we never once ever read any of them. And so I'm like, what's a good one? And so this YouTuber that I watch, Deconstruction Zone, his name's Justin, and he's got a couple of his stuff's awesome. Yeah, he's got a couple of recommendations for Bibles, and so I got one, and it's a study Bible. And he was like, "Well, the thing about this Catholic study Bible is that they're not trying to be persuasive. They're just telling you, they're just scholars that went through, they know the background, and they have all these little footnotes. I mean, each page is half of it scripture, or 2/3 of it is scripture, and then the rest of it is some footnotes with about the individual scriptures. So this book is like this thick. I should have brought it down, but yeah. So my daughter and I, we read it, and we talk about it because I do think that it's a book. It has huge cultural importance, and so I think people should know more than what they actually know about it. But that's the other thing. Like, it's fine to talk about Jesus and loving your neighbor and caring for the sick and all that kind of stuff. And yet at the same time, you're absolutely ignoring the passage that we read last night whenever Moses comes down after he gets the second set, and no, maybe his first set. And he comes down from the mountain dealing with the whole 10 Commandments and finds out that they're doing the whole dancing to the golden calf thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it says in there that the Levites go through and slaughter 3,000 people. And I'm like, it's funny how we just kind of grazed over that little fact, and I've read through the Bible before when I was much younger, and then as you get older, you kind of end up just doing whatever church does because it's nice and happy and pretty. But I'm like, no, let's go through the rough stuff. So we're doing it start to finish. So
as I get older and lose more hair, I become especially fond of Elisha calling on God to have a bear kill 40 kids for teasing him for being bald. That one really resonates with me.
It resonates. And yet, has anyone ever teased you for being bald? I mean,
no, actually, no. I mean, you can see this. It's perfectly round. I mean,
you got a great head. What's great, So. Yeah, it's a bit rough. It's a little disproportionate, as a response. But we see that today. There's a certain little Middle Eastern country right now that's unveiling a very disproportionate response to an action that was taken against it. Am I pro one side or the other? Nope, just pro-human. Just do the human thing. And
that's right.
The human thing is find a way to enact justice without killing everyone there. But to be fair, that region has bred these books that tell them that's okay. You know? And I think that mindset needs to be broken for the future of humanity.
I agree. Annihilationism is looking better and better.
Yeah. Anyway, so what are you doing today? Like these days, you're you're not as horribly scarred as I am, and you live your life, and you enjoy your
Well, I kind of now want to walk that back a little bit, only to say I don't have to face it as much as I used to. So, the idea of reading a Bible every night, whether to a child or to anybody, really made my skin crawl. Like hearing you talk about it, as much as I appreciate it and admire it, I couldn't do it. I don't think I could read those words anymore. Now, I have atheist friends who love it. They absorb. In fact, one of them I want to put you in touch with. He'd be great guest for you. He's
sure.
We've only met via online, and we've been friends now almost 10 years, and we've never met in person. So, but he's a great guy. But loves to absorb Christian authors, the Bible. Like he is a consummate Bible scholar, and I don't have the mental or emotional energy for that. I did that for a long time. And, so to say I'm not scarred maybe isn't so much the truth as I have the luxury of not needing to confront them, and maybe that will change. But nowadays, after school, I went to school, as mentioned, as a non-conforming student. Back in 2010, graduated in 2014 with a degree, went straight into grad school. I work in corporate stuff, I've got life things going on. I've got a daughter getting married, in November.
Awesome.
We've got 2 houses that we're working on. We live in my wife's childhood home out in the country. We're renovating another house in town. We're busy enough. And then of course the weight of, the world we live in and what my role in that is supposed to be, is an all consuming, thought. But, and maybe it's not, it's just that I'm far enough removed from it, but then running into a former, congregation member really did bring back a lot. So it's at the surface.
Right. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to trigger you with
No,
my
no, no, no,
daily
no,
Bible reading
no.
of
No, it's fine.
yeah.
I really wish I could be like that. You know what I mean? Because like you being able to still, like, I would think it'd be more raw for you than it is for me because you're much closer to that. But no, I fully support what you're doing and understand it. I just
I
don't think I could.
I think maybe because you're isolated, like you live in the country and you
Yeah,
get to kind of pick and
yeah.
choose, and you do live in a smaller area than where I live. Where me, if I drive to work, I see no less than 10 churches, so I'm constantly exposed to it, and um, you know, on a hot day or in a cold winter, you can kind of wonder like those buildings are all empty. There's a handful of maybe 2, 3 cars in the parking lot, and just think of all that you could do with those buildings.
Mhm.
And nothing's being done. And yeah, I know I'm passing judgment, whatever. But I mean, I see problems, and I'm like, well, let's fix them.
Right, right.
Let's
Yeah, there's
try
a
to do
practical
something.
side. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's always like some small ministry that maybe has coupled with uh, another nonprofit organization. It's that 80-20 rule. Like those, they're the 20% that's feeding people in your community that have need. And it's not usually the churches. They might do a thing once a year or every 6 months where they go out and raise pencils for school students or something, something like that. But it's not like real stuff. And I mean, not saying that that's not real, but
I hear you.
I think we could do more if the impact of the faith was so great, then there'd be a lot fewer people bitching and moaning online about that, and they'd be making an impact. It'd be so amazing. And that's the Apple fanboy thing, right? So like whenever it's been a while since it's been that crazy, but there was a time where people would show up at the store and line up to get the new phone, right? Because it was novel, it was amazing. People were talking about it. I remember the first time I had mine and took it out to Western Kansas, where there was nobody had anything like this. I was way ahead of the curve, and my sister-in-law was like, "What's that thing you're looking at?"
Mhm.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like
Yep.
it causes you to go, "Wow, I'm so amazed that this person is into this. I just want to check it out." And then you don't see any of that. If it's anything, it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can talk to you because I don't know if you're going to yell at me because I have on a black, t-shirt with a band on it. You're going to tell me I'm showing too much leg, or you're going to be really cool. I mean, my wife's had people come up to her and tell her that she it's not like she dresses immodestly, whatever that means. But yeah, but no, to just have somebody come up and, I mean, but those are the pretty far out people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
my daughter works in retail, and about every 3 or 4 weeks, she comes home with a new piece of paraphernalia that somebody has just slid her and said, "Here, I want to give this to you." So,
Ugh, I
so
have little
yeah,
patience for that. Yeah,
so I'm not as separated from it. And so, yeah, it's fine for me to read the Bible. It's just a book.
yeah,
So got to
yeah.
read something. And I told the kid that I read with, I'm like, I'm actually pretty excited to get to these books that I never got to read, the deuterocanonical books,
Mhm.
like Maccabees and things like that. So everybody has the thing that caused them to seal the deal, and then everybody has their thing that triggers them. I don't know what the big trigger is for me yet. I haven't found anything that made me go, "Oh, that's just
Well,
hard
let's
for me
work
to
on that.
handle."
Let's find it.
Oh. I mean, I suppose if I come outside and it's tomorrow morning and there's frogs all over the ground, then I
Okay.
might be
Yeah.
like, although, did you ever see that movie Magnolia?
Is that the Tom Cruise thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's been
there's
a
a scene
while.
in
Yeah.
there's a scene in there where it starts raining frogs, and I thought that's funny. They must have pulled that from the Bible, and I looked it up, and I'm like, no, that happens every once in a while. There's a gust that comes through like a microburst. It sucks up um fish and
Yep.
frogs and other things
Yep.
from a pond and just, deposit them somewhere else.
Yep.
And
And
then
it's a
people are like,
knock-on effect when the frogs die. Like there's like, an algae bloom in the water turns it red, which kills fish, which then brings flies, and like the order of
interesting.
the. Yes, there's like a natural explanation for some
Wow.
of the
So you're telling me
plagues.
there's naturalistic explanations for some things that are
Amazing.
written. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where I lean on just faith, not faith, but religion in general tends to be proto-science. It's this
Yeah.
thing that happened before we figured out how to figure out the things. But here we are,
Yep.
2025, and people are
Well,
still
Well,
living.
who said it? I mean, God, the God of the gaps, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to say DeGrasse Tyson is the one that said God is an ever receding. You know, I can't remember his exact words, but the more we learn, the more
Yeah.
God recedes. But
Yeah.
like once we learn that no, it's not chariots and horses that pull the sun across the sky. Well, then we
Yeah.
just
It's
we just
not?
move God back a
What?
little bit.
Whoa, whoa,
No,
whoa, back
no,
up. It's not? Oh,
sorry, we should
gosh.
have started earlier. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. So, yeah, no, I saw this Instagram reel the other day. It's this guy I follow that he teaches critical thinking through his short little reels, and he said, God has actually gotten a lot less powerful. That he started off creating the universe, and now he shows up on toast, and
Right.
it's
Yeah,
like,
or find your keys, or gives you a
right,
good
yeah,
parking spot. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So we're down to the finding keys part of
Right.
of of faithful obedience.
Well,
So
that is probably, and maybe this is a good place to end. I know that's not a political podcast, but that's one light at the end of the tunnel for me is the absolute uh, uh, frantic push of Christian nationalists. I think is the biggest indicator of something that's dying. It's not something that is thriving. It's not as
an extinction burst.
it's
Have you heard
there
this
it is.
term? Yeah.
No, but that makes a ton of sense to me.
Hold on. Let me go to the Google. Man, they're getting free advertising tonight. I just want to make sure that an extinction burst is a temporary increase in the frequency, intensity, or duration of a behavior when it is no longer reinforced.
Oh,
So, I mean, yeah, I would say
okay.
if I walk in my neighborhood, right, most people are fine. You got the HOA people and they're who they are, and then I got the old people down the street and they're who they are, and then you got the one guy that's like the weirdo with the unkept yard, that's fine. But for the most part, I don't see them as my mortal enemies.
Right.
I'm sure we
Yep.
have opposing viewpoints based upon the signs that happened during the election season. But outside of that, I mean, hey man, you need help with that? I'll come help you. Can I help? Can I rely on you? And that's, yeah. I think that it's no longer being reinforced, and that it could be an extinction burst type of thing where this is the last gasp to try to do something, and we'll see. Tough to, yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks a lot for participating
No,
and
thank you for
doing this,
forcing me
and
to.
we'll definitely do more of these. So yeah, I'll say goodnight.